I was awakened by the sound of a baby crying.
What on earth is going on?
When I opened the door, I found an infant wrapped in swaddling clothes left at my doorstep.
What kind of melodramatic TV plot is this?
No matter how hard I racked my brain, I couldn't figure out where this baby came from.
Should I call my ex-girlfriend? But we broke up 8 months ago. It seems a bit abrupt.
After much deliberation, I decided to take the baby for a paternity test. But if I had known that my ex-girlfriend would be the one conducting the test, I definitely wouldn't have shown up in person.
John Carter, I really feel like drawing a few more vials of your blood.
Don't, that's illegal.
Emily let out a cold laugh.
If I remember correctly, we broke up just 8 months ago.
Judging by her reaction, this baby probably isn't hers.
Yeah.
But for now, let her misunderstand. I didn't know how to explain it to her. After all, even if I told her, she probably wouldn't believe me. Aside from these few words, we had no other conversation. Even the other doctors and nurses around us noticed the slightly awkward situation between us. Dating Emily Sanders was completely unexpected. In my junior year, a particularly popular mobile game set in a fantasy world took the campus by storm. Within the game, I encountered a top player named Distant Cuckoo's Cry. Following the example of others, I began tagging along with her as a game partner. To my surprise, this top player accepted me.
She would take me on quests, help me level up, and when I was pursued by members of other guilds, she would use dazzling skills to save me.
One day, Distant Cuckoo's Cry sent me a message.
Why don't we meet up? I'm also in the capital city.
I paced around my dorm for half an hour, unable to make a decision.
Dude, if Distant Cuckoo's Cry has such a nice voice, she must look great too.
Yeah, if you're nervous. We'll follow you secretly.
Feeling pushed into it, I arranged to meet Distant Cuckoo's Cry at a cafe near our school. When the three of us saw Emily Sanders sitting by the window, leisurely sipping her coffee and gazing out, we were all stunned. Emily Sanders, a graduate student in medical laboratory science, was the pride of the university and widely recognized as unattainable. Rumor had it that in her 5 years of undergraduate and 2 years of graduate studies, she had never dated anyone.
The untouchable Emily Sanders was my in-game partner?
Go ahead, man. You got this.
Michael gave me a push, causing me to stumble right in front of Emily.
Emily, are you Distant Cuckoo's Cry?
Yes, and you must be John Carter?
That's me.
The legendary unattainable beauty was sitting right across from me, sipping her coffee and chatting about the game and our studies. I was so nervous, sitting upright like a schoolboy, barely daring to breathe. We had a great conversation, and just as we were about to leave, Emily suddenly called my name seriously.
John Carter.
I looked at her intently.
I think our relationship can go beyond the game.
As we walked out of the cafe, Emily held my hand. I noticed her ears were slightly red, while my cheeks were already burning. Passing by Michael Brown and David Miller, their faces were full of disbelief as they watched us leave. And so, John Carter from the nursing department became a legend at the medical university, with everyone wildly speculating on how I managed to win over Emily Sanders.
I admit, no guy could resist a girl like Emily Sanders.
Including me, who had previously sneaked to the medical laboratory classroom several times just to catch a glimpse of the unattainable Emily Sanders. The Gaming Guild was planning an offline gathering, coinciding with the start of my senior year. Emily Sanders was also busy with her graduation thesis. I approached Emily with a playful grin.
Emily, let's go together, I pleaded, shaking her arm.
I knew she couldn't resist this tactic.
All right, she said, pinching my cheek, I'll go with you.
When the guild members found out we had developed from in-game partners to a real-life couple, they all congratulated us and hinted at future family plans.
Congratulations, you two. Wishing you a long-lasting relationship.
That night, Emily got a bit tipsy.
Let's get a room, she insisted, dragging me to a nearby hotel.
When people drink too much, they really don't know what they might do. I vaguely remember that night. She pushed me onto the bed, clumsily trying to tear off my clothes, biting my ear, and nibbling on my collarbone. This time, I couldn't resist. The next morning, I woke up with a pout, pointing at my collarbone and chest, where there were 2 neat bite marks from her.
Look at these marks.
Well, you can bite me back, she mumbled, pulling the blanket over her face.
Once something happens the first time, it tends to happen again and again. Of course, we always took necessary precautions. Later, Emily suggested I move into her apartment to live with her.
Why don't you move in with me?
I'd love to. I happily packed my things and started a carefree cohabitation with Emily.
One day, before graduation, Emily's mentor took her out of town for a study exchange, leaving me alone at home, fretting over my graduation project. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and a middle-aged woman stood there.
I am Emily Sanders' mother.
Mrs. Parker didn't beat around the bush and directly explained the Sanders family's background to me.
The Sanders family has been in the medical industry for over 30 years, with high-end private hospitals all over the country.
I thought she would persuade me to leave, but instead, she handed me a file folder.
You are Richard Carter's son, right?
That's right.
Linda Parker smiled lightly.
Then take your time to look through these. I'll be leaving now.
Linda Parker put down her cup, stood up gracefully, and left. I opened the file folder in confusion, not understanding what my father had to do with the Sanders family. But after reading the contents, I felt as if I had been plunged into an ice cellar. In my memory, about 20 years ago, my parents were always very busy. We lived in a spacious house with a beautiful garden and a swing. There were endless snacks, various toy cars, and video games. Then one day, my dad told my sister and me that we were moving. We moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs, and my parents no longer left early and returned late every day but opened a small clinic. It wasn't until I grew up that I understood our family had fallen on hard times. My dad's business had failed. And all the contents of that file folder pointed to one thing: the person responsible for this outcome was Emily Sanders' father, Robert Sanders. John sat on the sofa, lost in thought about how his parents would react if he brought Emily Sanders home. The Sanders family was considered enemies in the Miller household. Standing up suddenly, John felt dizzy. Emily wasn't home, and her return date was uncertain. He packed his things and hired a moving company to send them back home, ready to move on. John sent Emily a message on WeChat.
Emily, let's break up. Don't come looking for me, and don't contact my roommates. I just don't want to continue anymore. Consider me a jerk. Goodbye and take care.
Without waiting for her reply, John blocked her on WeChat and phone. He also posted in their dorm group chat, informing them of the breakup. John passed his graduation defense smoothly but hadn't been eating or sleeping well, losing a lot of weight. His mom, Mrs. Miller, thought he was overly anxious about the graduation defense and kept encouraging him, making all kinds of delicious food.
John, you need to eat more. You've worked so hard. You deserve a treat.
Only John knew it was the breakup that made him restless. A few months later, a child appeared at John's doorstep, leading to a dramatic turn of events. He completed a paternity test and confessed everything to his parents that night, calling Sarah Carter's family over as well.
Hey, there's a little brother.
John, Sarah, and his parents were stunned, staring at the sleeping baby in John's room.
John, Did Nian Nian say there's a little brother? Sometimes children's intuition is very accurate. What's going on?
The six of them stared at the sleeping baby, wide-eyed and speechless.
Is this child yours?
I don't know. I just did a paternity test.
Mr. Miller, trembling with anger, pinched the bridge of his nose. Although the results were not yet out, in the spirit of humanitarianism, we decided to keep the child. To help the family business recover, I, like my sister, stayed at our family clinic to expand the enterprise. After nearly 20 years of development, our family had long since moved from the suburbs to the inner city. The clinic had grown from its original 40 square meters to a 2-story building, with 7 or 8 doctors on staff, resembling a small private hospital. Since our entire family was in the medical profession, we took pretty good care of the little baby. At least, he was well nourished. One day, when I woke up from a nap, I noticed my sister looking at me strangely.
What's wrong?
You were talking in your sleep, calling out the name Emily Sanders. Is she the child's mother?
I didn't know how to respond.
Why don't you give him a nickname first? Otherwise, we won't know what to call him.
Let's call him Newbie.
All right then, since you named him, come and help out. After all, he's your child.
Before I could explain, she put the baby down and left. As I carried the baby to the hospital lobby, I saw Emily Sanders sitting on a bench. I admit, I was shocked to see her. My first instinct was to walk away, but she called out to me.
John Carter, who is the child's mother really?
I don't know.
Emily Sanders looked at me intently, asking in a low voice whose child it was. I didn't want to get involved with her again. Digging up old grudges would not end well for either of us.
Shouldn't I be asking you that question?
Emily Sanders said nothing, silently looking at the baby for a few moments. She frowned at me before leaving. The baby was still very young, his eyes barely open, making it impossible to tell who he resembled. These past few days, Emily Sanders would occasionally drop by my clinic to take a quick look at me, then turn around and leave. One day, Anna Johnson came by to bring me some food, and she happened to run into Emily Sanders.
Emily, why are you here again?
I heard from Dr. Carter that you've been taking care of a child recently, so I came to check on you.
I was quite surprised to see Anna. She was a young doctor from the clinic next door, 2 years younger than me. I knew Anna had feelings for me, but my heart couldn't accommodate anyone else, and I had clearly rejected her several times. At that moment, Anna was standing in the hospital with a thermal lunchbox in her hand. Behind her was Emily Sanders, silently staring at the lunchbox. When I was with Emily, I would prepare lunch for her every week. I told her I enjoyed cooking for the one I loved. For the next 2 or 3 days, Anna came to the hospital every day, and each time she coincidentally ran into Emily. Emily's frown deepened with each encounter. One day, I received a call from the nanny service center. The sweet voice on the other end informed me that the nanny could start the next day. I was bewildered, as I hadn't requested any nanny.
Mr. Carter, this was arranged by Ms. Sanders.
Emily Sanders? I hesitated for a moment, then took her well-known number off the blacklist and dialed it.
Little Jian.
Little Jian was my nickname, and only my family and Emily called me that. Hearing her call me Little Jian made my heart tremble. When we were together, she loved to hold me and call me Little Jian repeatedly. I'm coming to see you. Don't. Before I could finish my sentence, she had already hung up. The next day, the maternity nurse arrived at the hospital right on schedule. The entire family was present, and Jane aimed to keep everything as normal as possible.
Jane, can you add me on WeChat first? I've changed several accounts over the past few months to add you. but you haven't accepted any of them.
Jane, having blocked Emily after their breakup, hesitated for a moment but then added her back on WeChat.
Sure, Emily. Here you go.
Jane's first action after adding Emily was to transfer the maternity nurse's fee to her, determined not to owe her anything.
There, I've transferred the fee to you.
No need to transfer it to me. I won't accept it.
Emily returned the money, standing her ground.
By the way, I'll be out of town for a month for further training. Please remember to reply to my WeChat messages.
During the month Emily was away, she almost called Jane via video every day. Each time, Jane would find an excuse to hang up after a brief conversation. Many times, Emily seemed to want to say something but hesitated, and Jane pretended not to notice. With the help of the efficient maternity nurse, the household was no longer chaotic. Jane glanced at the sleeping baby, Ethan, lying on the bed.
Ethan, who are your real parents? What if we can't find your parents?
Of course, the baby couldn't understand what Jane was saying and continued to sleep soundly, soft and small, with a sweet, milky scent. John had stopped responding to Emily Sanders' calls and video chats, choosing instead to send her a message on WeChat.
Emily, you can't force a relationship.
Who told you I like forced relationships?
John didn't reply again, letting the WeChat notifications ding incessantly. Emily returned from her training, bringing John's test results with her. Anna Johnson was also present that day.
John Carter.
Sensing the tension, Anna quickly stepped in.
Dr. Sanders, both of us are interested in John. Do you think being so forceful will make him like you?
It was clear that Emily didn't want to engage with Anna, but Anna wasn't planning to back down.
Besides, I'm an orphan. If the child's biological mother can't be found, no one would mind me being the stepmother to John's child. But you, on the other hand, might not be so acceptable, right?
Emily was too furious to speak. She slammed a document onto the table in front of John with a loud thud.
John Carter, care to explain this?
Then she turned to Anna, saying irritably,
You don't even know whose mother you're trying to be.
In front of John was a paternity test. As he had expected, the child wasn't his. Anna was stunned. She probably never imagined that the child had such an unclear origin. Since Emily was John's paternity doctor, it was only a matter of time before this day came.
If I said this child appeared out of nowhere, would you believe me?
Not a chance.
Anna, you should go home. This is between the two of us, and we'll sort it out.
Anna reluctantly left John's house, looking back with every step. Emily Sanders grasped John's arm, her eyes misty with emotion.
John Carter, this child just appeared out of nowhere. I have no idea who left him at my doorstep.
Emily, you broke up with me without any explanation, and now you suddenly have a child without any clarification. What on earth are you doing?
John pondered for a long while before going back to his room to retrieve the envelope Linda Parker had given him. He handed the envelope to Emily, telling her to read it later.
What's this?
Emily, the reason I insisted on breaking up back then was because of this. Take it home and read it slowly.
Emily left, still doubtful, clutching the envelope. When she came to John's door, the nanny had quietly called John's mom and Sarah Carter. By the time they rushed back from the clinic, Emily had already been gone for half a day.
John, I heard the doctor sent you a report. So, is this child yours?
No, Mom.
During dinner, John listlessly pushed the rice around in his bowl.
Mom, Dad, if I were to be with the daughter of your enemy, would you oppose it?
They were clearly taken aback by his question. His mom tapped his head with her chopsticks.
Have you lost your mind from studying too much? Aside from irreconcilable hatred, what grudges can't be resolved? Besides, your dad and I don't have any enemies.
Then why did our family go bankrupt before?
It wasn't exactly bankruptcy. Back then, we were young and hot-headed, couldn't stand the infighting among brothers.
It was Robert. Don't talk while eating, she said, stuffing a piece of cucumber into John's mouth.
But the envelope Linda Parker gave John said otherwise. He felt his dad's explanation didn't add up, but he couldn't find the answer. He could only pin his hopes on Emily Sanders. But they hadn't been in contact for several days. Not only had Emily been silent, but Anna Johnson had also disappeared these past few days. His sister said she seemed to have taken a few days off. Instead of Emily, an unexpected guest arrived. That evening, the whole family was at home, busy taking care of the baby, when a young, handsome man suddenly showed up. John's instincts told him this guy was definitely up to no good. Despite his good looks, there was an underlying air of menace about him. With a single sentence from Peter Collins, it felt like a thunderbolt had struck the room.
Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Collins, Emily Sanders' fiancé.
No wonder she hadn't contacted me these past few days. She had gone to see her fiancé.
Is Emily Sanders the doctor who did the report for little Jane? I remember seeing that name on the report.
Yes, that does sound familiar.
Peter Collins let out a cold snort before turning to look at me.
Uncle, and you probably don't know this, but your son has been involved with a married woman and even brought home a child that's not his.
He then glanced disdainfully at the child in my arms. Hearing Peter Collins' words, my parents' faces changed instantly. Although I knew they wouldn't believe him, it was true that I had inexplicably ended up with a child who wasn't biologically related to me.
John, what's going on?
Though he was usually open-minded, if I had really interfered in someone else's relationship, he might just break my legs.
Emily Sanders and we've been dating for 2 years. She never mentioned she had a fiancé.
My chest tightened, and I instinctively clenched my fists. My mind went blank, and all I could remember were the words fiancé. I couldn't even explain how we met or fell in love. My grip on the child tightened unconsciously. The child started crying loudly, and my mom took her from my arms.
Seeing that I couldn't explain anything, she took out my phone. Why don't we call Dr. Sanders to confirm?
I nodded vigorously from the sofa.
Just as Peter Collins was about to snatch the phone, Emily Sanders answered the call.
John.
Emily Sanders, this is John Carter's sister. Your fiancé is here.
What fiancé? I just got off the plane an hour ago and am on my way to your house.
Hearing this, Peter Collins' face changed dramatically, clearly caught in his lie. He turned to leave, but my sister Sarah Carter, along with my brother-in-law, firmly pinned him to the sofa, preventing him from getting up. Emily Sanders arrived with her father, Anna Johnson, and 2 police officers. As soon as she entered, she stood by my side.
What's going on? Gently pats John's back.
Emily, I don't understand any of this.
Robert, what's happening here?
Emily's father seemed to know my dad. However, we were all puzzled by this group's sudden appearance at our home.
It's my daughter, isn't it? She couldn't handle this small matter, so her old man had to come in person.
My ears were ringing, making it impossible to hear their conversation clearly. Meanwhile, Peter Collins, who was being held down by my brother-in-law, spoke with a trembling voice.
Dad, shivers more upon seeing Anna Johnson behind Emily. Anna Johnson.
Don't call me Dad. Kindly turns to the police officers. Officers, you can take him away now.
Peter Collins fell to his knees with a thud, tears streaming down his face.
Dad, I'm Peter Collins.
Peter Collins, George Smith's son, Peter Collins.
Peter was taken away in handcuffs, reported by Anna Johnson for stealing business secrets from the Sanders family.
John, you and Dr. Sanders should have a good talk. You two are great together.
Her sincere tone made me think she had been possessed by someone else. Just a few days ago, they were like fire and water, and now Anna was speaking up for Emily.
You know I'm an orphan. The Sanders family has a genetic database, and a few days ago, they helped me find my biological parents.
We all knew Anna was an orphan. She had been taken to an orphanage after being abducted and had never found her biological parents. It was a surprise that the Sanders family had located them.
We disappeared for a few days because I took Anna to find her biological parents. Not only that, but we also worked with my family to gather evidence of Linda Parker and her son's theft of business secrets.
Moreover, Peter Collins and I were in the same orphanage.
What?
I widened my eyes as Anna and Emily explained the whole story. My dad and Emily's father occasionally added details. Emily Sanders and I sat in the dimly lit room, the weight of revelations pressing down on us.
You mean the documents you gave me were fake?
Not entirely, but most of the information was fabricated by Linda Parker and Peter Collins.
Our conversation took us back 25 years.
My father and your father were fellow disciples, along with George Smith, who was Peter Collins' father. George made a significant mistake while treating a patient.
My dad and Emily's father did everything they could to help their junior, George Smith, but all three were eventually dismissed from the hospital. They sought new opportunities and turned their attention to the then untapped private healthcare sector in the country.
The Sanders and Smith families, being well off, developed quickly. Within 2 years, George Smith started scheming against the Sanders family, doing many things behind their backs.
Knowing my dad's character, he would rather lose everything than not help Robert Sanders establish a foothold in the medical market in Beijing. And they did succeed.
George Smith, in his rush to expand, took on massive high-interest loans. Coupled with a shortage of medical talent and resources at the time, the hospital faced operational issues.
Unable to repay the high-interest loans and bank loans, George Smith had no choice but to dismiss all medical staff, sell off fixed assets, and ultimately, he ended his life tragically.
Hearing this, I understood the full picture.
Linda Parker rewrote the competition between the Sanders and Smith families into a rivalry between the Sanders and Carter families, making me mistakenly believe it was your father who crushed my dad in the business world, leading to his downfall?
That's exactly it.
And what about Peter Collins?
Peter Collins was born a month after George Smith's passing. He was abandoned at the orphanage door by Linda Parker right after birth. When he was 4, Linda Parker took him back from the orphanage and brought him into the Sanders family.
The truth, now unveiled, left us both in a state of contemplation, the weight of past misdeeds and misunderstandings lingering in the air. Peter Collins arrived at the orphanage when Anna Johnson was already 5 years old. Once Peter learned to walk, he followed Anna everywhere, even declaring that he would marry her when he grew up.
I met Peter Collins again after I graduated from college.
I raised an eyebrow, teasingly.
And did he still want to marry you?
Funny enough, yes. He said once he got hold of the Sanders family's assets, he would marry me.
Get hold of the Sanders family's assets?
Are you saying that Linda Parker and Peter Collins are aiming to bring down the Sanders family?
Emily Sanders turned my face towards her, her eyes full of affection.
Not only do they want to bring down my family, but they also want to separate us.
It turned out that Linda Parker's original name was Jessica Taylor. After George Smith passed away, she changed her name and got hired as a nanny for the Sanders family. Emily Sanders' mother had passed away early, and Linda Parker had worked as a nanny for many years. Over time, she developed feelings for Robert Sanders and eventually became Emily's stepmother, bringing Peter Collins into the family. Linda Parker always believed that George Smith couldn't handle the pressure from the Sanders family and ended his own life. So, her goal from the beginning was to make the Sanders family pay. She even wanted Peter Collins to marry Emily Sanders to better control the family. Over the years, the Sanders family's business secrets had been frequently leaked, but they could never pinpoint the source of the problem. It turned out that it was all orchestrated by Linda Parker and Peter Collins.
Anna, how did you find out about all this?
After reuniting with Peter, he would often come to me after drinking too much. One time, he brought a bunch of documents, boasting about how flawlessly he had forged them, saying the Sanders family was doomed.
Not only that, but due to Peter's frequent drunkenness, Anna had gathered a lot of evidence of his theft of business secrets. Could there be a more coincidental twist? The documents Peter showed Anna were the same ones Linda had given me. I had handed them over to Emily Sanders, and Anna had come to thank Emily for helping her find her biological parents. She saw those documents on Emily's desk.
Honestly, I was quite hesitant at the time, but if I didn't speak up about what I knew, I wouldn't be able to live with my conscience.
Narrator, tone, relieved after absorbing the entire story, I couldn't help but sigh.
Round and round, we were all played by Linda Parker and her son.
Narrator, tone, cheerful Emily Sanders glared at me and pinched my cheek.
Are you the only smart one here?
Narrator, tone, eager. My dad quickly jumped into the conversation with a hint of urgency.
Yes, yes. When something like this happens, you should come home and ask.
Narrator, tone, thoughtful. I felt my father's strong disapproval, but he seemed to have a point. The living room cleared out, leaving just Emily Sanders and me.
Emily Sanders, tone, serious Mr. John Carter, don't you think it's time to give me a proper title?
Narrator, tone, affectionate. I pulled her into my arms. She laughed, her eyes sparkling.
By the way, that child, who exactly is he?
Narrator, tone, serious. Emily Sanders shook her head.
Peter Collins and his team found him. When Anna Johnson and I contacted the orphanage director, we were informed that on the day Peter Collins visited the orphanage, a baby was left at the door. Peter said he could adopt the child and took him away.
Narrator, tone, anxious. My heart tightened.
So this child, do you think we should take him in?
Emily Sanders, tone, hopeful. You've been caring for this child for so long. You must have feelings for him. Besides, he's in need of a family.
I rushed back to the room, picked up the baby from the crib, and placed him in Emily Sanders' arms.
From now on, this will be your mom.
Narrator, tone, cheerful. The baby babbled incessantly, showering Emily Sanders' face with kisses. Emily Sanders laughed, and so did I, as a gentle kiss landed on my lips. Later, we gave the baby a formal name, Ethan Carter. Narrator, tone, hopeful. The meaning was simple. We hoped he would embrace a new and better life under our care. Narrator, tone, excited. On Ethan Carter's 100th day celebration, all our friends and family gathered. Taking this opportunity, I proposed to Emily Sanders. Narrator, tone, emotional. My father, Richard Carter, and Emily Sanders' father, Robert Sanders, both tearfully handed us the household registration book. On the day Emily Sanders and I registered our marriage, she suddenly burst into tears while sitting at the registration office window, staring at the two red booklets. The staff members all turned their heads to look at us. An older lady even asked her if she was being forced.
Emily, don't cry. People will think I'm forcing you to marry me.
She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears, and choked out while clutching my shirt.
John, I thought we would never be together again.
My hand paused as I wiped her tears, guilt welling up inside me. I hugged her and patted her back to comfort her.
I'm here.
I didn't show our marriage certificate photo to anyone. After registering our marriage,
John, I want sweet and sour pork and stir-fried cabbage tomorrow.
Okay.
I smiled as I prepared a lunchbox for Emily.
John, I don't want to take care of the baby anymore. I'm so tired.
Okay.
We hired a nanny. At night, she took Ethan to her room.
Emily, I want to sleep with you.
Emily paused and said,
Okay.
Emily, you hesitated. Do you not love me anymore?
John, we need to be moderate.
I was even more dissatisfied and muttered.
You think I'm not capable.
Emily couldn't help but laugh and cry at the same time.
That's not it.
Then I carried her into the bedroom. A moment of spring night is worth 1,000 gold. The end. Extra, Emily Sanders' perspective.
Emily, why do you like me?
We were sitting on a plane to Zhishuangbana at the time. He always seemed to find it unbelievable that I would like him.
John, if I told you I fell in love with you at first sight 20 years ago, would you believe me?
How is that possible?
I wasn't lying to him. That day, my dad promised to take me to the amusement park but had to deliver some materials to an uncle named Carter first. My dad's car stopped in front of a kindergarten. I sat in the car and saw a little boy, 3 or 4 years old, standing next to Uncle Carter. His hair was fluffy and neat, his big eyes blinking, and his skin fair and tender, just like a little prince from a fairy tale.
Dad, is that Uncle Carter's son?
That's his son. He also has a daughter about your age.
My dad said Uncle Carter's son was named John Carter. I remembered that name. But Beijing is a big city, and I never saw him again after that. Until I went to college. One day, as I walked out of the classroom, I heard an excited voice from a boy nearby.
John Carter, it's her.
John Carter? I thought it was just someone with the same name. But when I looked up, I met those familiar eyes from my memory, and I was sure it was him. I always saw him at the classroom door, and every time he saw me, he would quickly run away. I accidentally discovered that John Carter was playing the same mobile game as me. And we were in the same server, the same guild. Because of his game name, it was almost like using his real name online. So, what was initially just a way to pass the time, I started taking seriously. Sure enough, one day, he followed me and asked,
Big sister, want to team up? There's a task.
Of course, I was happy to, and I even invited him to meet offline. The boy who was like a little prince in my memory, I finally held his hand.